Well, I was Wendy Metcalf when I joined. That was my maiden name. And I joined September 61 and I left in March 1965 on marriage. You couldn't stay in those days when you got married. I was born in 1943 in January, and I grew up in a back-to-back house with my parents and my brother until I was 10, and then we got a council house. But I had what you call a working class bringing up, but a very loving parents and well looked after. Oh, I loved school. My brother was only 13 months older than me, and I cried and wanted to go to school when he went to school, so they actually let me. So I started school about 3.5. And then I went to junior school after that. I just loved school. And I failed my 11 plus, and I really had wanted to pass, but I failed. And I went to St John's Girls Secondary Modern School. But I was very happy there, really. I was always in the top stream. And I left when I was 15, and I started working in an insurance office at that age. We didn't have a lot of money. I used to earn £2.10, and I gave my mum £2, and I had 10 bob left. And if I ended up cycling to work because I wanted to save the 10 shillings to buy myself a lipstick or something. And it was the rock and roll era, and we had a youth club we used to go to, and I had a friend who was very thin and I was very fat, and I think we were quite a spectacle when we were jiving, but I loved it, it was good. I think I always wanted to travel, and my parents were, I wouldn't say they were controlling, but they were very cautious that you didn't do this and you didn't do that, etc. I was always a good girl, but anyhow I decided to join, and my mum was really good. She said, well, I won't stop you. She said her mother had tried to stop her doing things, and so she said I promised I'd never do that. And she actually came with me when I signed on the dotted line. All I can remember, because it's a long time ago, is that it was an armed forces office in Wakefield, and that was where I went along. And we went in an upstairs room and signed the paperwork, my mum did, and I had to sign that I was going to learn, the Queen and all that. I can't remember the actual wording, but hold your hand up and swear on the Bible and that. And that was that. And then off I went eventually. I was excited, but I was a bit scared. When I got on the train, fortunately there was an older lady sitting across from me, and we got chatting, and she explained to me how to manage the underground because I hadn't a clue. And somehow I got to Waterloo. And I got on this train and I had to get off at a place called Hazelmere to change for Liphook. And on the station was one solitary person, a young woman, and I sort of chatted and I'm saying, you're not going to Liphook by any chance to the QA training? She said, yes, I am, and she was from Hull. Anyway, off we went, and when we got to Liphook, there was a Land Rover there waiting to pick us up. So off we went to the training camp, which was in the Surrey Woods, because we thought, where on earth are we going? And that was a bit sort of exciting, but a bit scary, We got issued with kit first, and we had thick stockings, we had navy blue and white pyjamas, looked like convicts, and we had greatcoats down to our feet, and everything you could possibly imagine was given to us, even underwear. And we had a red tunic and grey long bloomers and a skirt for PT. And anyway, then basic training was, what shall I say, military subjects, but also maths and English. And then we had a lot of squad marching and saluting, learning to march, learning to salute. And I had a funny experience with the regimental sergeant major. We were in a hangar doing saluting practice, and he came in and he stopped in front of me and he said, "Do it again." And I've never saluted as fast in my life. I must have saluted about 6 times. Of course, my friends were trying to not laugh, you know. But anyway, yeah, it was strict. I can't remember the exact times, but I think we were only allowed out at the weekends for a few hours. But of course there was no transport. So we had a long walk to a nearest bus stop on the main road, a long, long walk. And we got picked up by this chap. There were a few of us. And the girl who sat in the front, when we got to where we were going, I think it was Petersfield, yeah, she was glad to get out because he was a weirdo, you know. So I think we walked back all the way, or we got a bus if we could. Can't remember that very well. It was very strict. You had to be in bed. Something like bed check was 10 o'clock. One of the captains came round and checked you were all sort of in bed or whatever. And once someone hid my mattress and didn't know where it was. And so I leapt onto the bed springs and threw all the blankets either side and hoped she wouldn't notice. And luckily she didn't. Otherwise I would have been on a charge. But we were naughty, you know. We used to put things up at the window so they couldn't see the lights. You know, we used to sit in the little room at the back and put greatcoats up, and then we'd all sit smoking on the floor. But by gum, if we got found out, you know, we would have been stuck. My first posting was to Woolwich, and it was the Royal Military Hospital, Royal Herbert Hospital at Woolwich. And I was there for 2 years as a nurse. That's where I started my nurse training. And it was a very happy time, very happy. I loved it there very much. My rank was Q100 4392, and I was a private. And my first posting was Woolwich, Royal Herbert Hospital at Woolwich, Tutors Hill. And it was a very, very nice hospital. We weren't in the best accommodation, but the wards and everything, you know, they were lovely. And I noticed, I'd done some nursing in Civvy Street, that the wards were better staffed. We had more staff, definitely. I enjoyed it. I'd done some nursing beforehand, so I got on very well with the sisters because I knew what to do, you know. I'd had a fair bit of experience. It was lovely having all these friends, you know, the companionship, and that was great. I worked along the lads who were our AMC, and we were all great pals. And we used to then socialise in our NAFI club, which was on the premises. Yes, I enjoyed it very much, and I enjoyed the training, you know. Well, I'd always wanted to go overseas, and eventually, I couldn't believe it. I thought I'd almost given up because I'd been there for 2 years, and then this posting came through for me to Singapore. And also one of my friends, was posted at the same time, so we were really pleased to be going together. And it was, I think, about the 3rd of December when we were flying on Qantas Airlines, and there were some other girls who joined us at the airport, who were going from other military hospitals, and I was in charge of everybody because I was just a bit older than everybody else, so I had all the paperwork. But anyway, we stopped in Bombay on the way. Prior to that, we stopped in Istanbul, just overnight to refuel. Then we stopped in Bombay to refuel, and then we landed in Singapore about midnight. And when they opened the doors of the plane, we couldn't believe the steam heat that hit us, which was Singapore. And we were absolutely amazed at the sights on the street driving from the airport to, we were picked up obviously by a military Land Rover, but the sights on the street, people sleeping on like put up beds outside their premises and cows on the grass in between the road. It was amazing, you know. And we got to the hospital and we were taken to the cookhouse. And the chef was going to give us some tea, but we persuaded him to make us a cooked breakfast. This was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, the flight was the 3rd of December. It was a 24-hour flight, 23 or 24-hour flight then, I can remember. And that's why we had to stop in Istanbul and Bombay to refuel. We landed at night, late in the early hours of the morning, and the cookhouse very kindly made us a cooked breakfast, and eventually we got to our rooms, which, you know, we all had our own rooms, which was great. But we woke up, I can remember, to torrential rain in the morning. We were allowed 1 day off before we started work. And so we were just amazed by it all. You know, it was wonderful, we thought. And then we went to our various wards. We were allocated our wards. I think, mine, first of all, mine was on children's, it wasn't children's ward, it was isolation ward. So there were some with little, you know, diseases or something like that. I can't remember now. I just remember Macken as the name for food, and we used to sort of say Macken, Macken for the little ones, and they were beautiful, you know, these little toddlers and that. I left Singapore in December 64, and I was posted to a military hospital called Millbank next to the Tate Gallery in London. I lived just off Cadogan Square in a house we had a lady who supervised us, and she'd worked as a nanny on somewhere in America anyway. And she was quite strict, so we had to be in again at certain times of the day and night, or at night. And I was there for about 3 months before I left on marriage. I got married and left on marriage, yeah. But I was on I think it's women's surgical ward. And I got a really good reference when I left that ward because I'd had some very poorly patients who I looked after. I can't quite remember the exact date. I think it was sometime in March that I left the military. And then I was married on the 13th of March. I'd taken my finals when I was at Millbank. And unfortunately, the results came back after I'd left the forces and I failed my finals. And circumstances somehow happened whereby I never did go back to nursing after that. And I embarked on an administrative career after that. But I got married and we lived in Woolwich. So I was back across from the road from the Royal Herbert Hospital, which was lovely, really. And then my husband was posted to Bielefeld in Germany. And it could be very lonely at times when they were away a lot, and you missed having all the camaraderie that you had in the military very much. If you were in a good posting where there were lots of other people that you knew and you'd got other wives to make friends with, that wasn't so bad. But if they were on duty a lot or away on schemes and exercises a lot, then it could be very, especially when you got a young child or children, yeah, it could be very difficult, yeah. When my husband and I divorced in 1980, that was when I had no more contact with the military as such. But I eventually decided to become a veteran, which was great. because I was back and I was meeting up with old friends. Not always, but and a lot of. I'm sadly gone up above, but yeah. So that's nice. It's just difficult sometimes the location of where they have the reunions. London's best because you've got the Union Jack Club to stay in, and it's easier to get to than going across country. I am a member of the Chester branch, but again, as I've got older, it's more difficult to go across to Chester than if you were going down to London. So, yeah, I miss it. Well, at first, when I had whatever I could get, really, I've done all sorts really early on. Some waitressing, I did some working in the NAFE, serving the soldiers the food and things like that. And then we got posted to Berlin. And my first job was at the Civilian Employment Office, but I was just like the filing clerk. But the secretary was called Krista. She was a lovely young woman. And they were all German apart from me. And all the other staff were German. It was quite interesting because they were telling me what happened and how they hid in cellars when the Russians came in the war, right? But this colonel, he was English. He ran the Civilian Employment Office, so it was run by the military. However, Krista was going on holiday, and the other girl in the office was supposed to step up to do his work while she was away, and she went off sick. So this particular day, Colonel Ridings came out of his office and looked, and he said, "Who's going to do my typing?" So I said, "Well, I'm afraid she's gone in sick, sir." You know, and sir, it was still sir, or Colonel Ridings, I can't remember. Anyway, so he said, well, and he's flustered, you know, I said, "Well, I can type if you want to try me out." Because I'd done it at night school and never forgotten it. So he said, "Can you?" So he said, "Well, yes, you know." Anyway, I started. I was a very good typist. In those days, you didn't make mistakes because there was there was blue tack, but that was awful. But, you know, it wasn't computerised or anything. So anyway, I typed something for him and he said, "That's great." Anyway, I did all the typing for him while they were away. It must have been 2 weeks or more. And before they came back, he said to me, "I'm going to get you a proper job." I thought, "Oh, they're great." And he got me a job in the press office in London block, which was the headquarters of the British Army on the Rhine, Berlin. And wow, I thought, you know, you had to have a pass to get in. And I worked in an office that was just down from where Philby, the spy, had worked, this lady told me. And this officer hadn't wanted an honorary rank's wife, he wanted an officer's wife. But I spoke a bit of pidgin German. Wasn't very good, but I could get by. And there was a civilian man, and he said to me, "Take no notice of him." And he told me, he said, "That's why he's crabby with you, you know." Anyway, she went, I couldn't believe it. This lady who was a secretary went on holiday after a fortnight, so I had to cover her. And I was liaising with the German press. Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. and, and then one day, my dear husband came home and said, "We're posted." I said, "Oh." And I said, "Where?" He said, "Northern Ireland." And I cried because it was 1973. And I thought, oh God, or 1972 it might have been, I forget. And so, of course, we did go there, and it was dreadful, it was awful. And after 3 months, there was a bomb just behind the kids' school was behind the parade of shops. And the bomb had been left in a car outside one of the shops. And they didn't get the kids come home at 3:30, past that shop and past that car possibly. And the British military got a warning at 4:30 that it was going to explode at 5. So they didn't have time to tell everybody. And believe it or not, I was just throwing coal on the fire when the bomb went off. So I thought, I didn't know what happened. Anyway, my girls, both of them were a little party 2 doors up. And of course I ran up there and we all didn't know what had happened. And then we found out eventually, you know, and that's when we decided that I should go home with the girls. We didn't have a home to go to. I had to go to my mum's sort of thing, you know. But then I had a bit of a legacy, so we bought a house in Wakefield. I had enough for the deposit. And then sort of he went out off into the sunset in 1980. One of my biggest challenges was trying to please everybody, all the sisters and things. You know, you couldn't please everybody. And some of them were very nice and some of them were very horrid. But I suppose exams, really, exams were challenging. You had so many distractions there, you know, and such a good social life. But I still did study. But anyway, I failed my finals. Oh, it was when I got home, but I failed the military finals as well, which I was really disappointed about, you know. So you think, all those years I've done all that work and it's come to nothing. Well, I've got my, what have I got? I've got prelims 1 and 2, which was the first exams you need before the final. So, you know, it was very I was disappointed with me, disappointed with myself. I made the wrong choices. Never mind. Some of the best things in military life were all the friends that you made from all over the world, as well as, you know, and near and far. And they were lovely. Most of them were really lovely. We had a great social life. The lads were good, you know, the chaps, they looked after you. If you went out, they'd look after you, you know, if you went out with them, make sure you were okay. It was great. You know, we used to have we used to have dancers in the hospital, well, in the NAFE, you know, and that. And I remember one time they'd invited another lot of chaps from another, I don't know where they were from now, I can't remember, another group anyway. And it all got a bit heated, you know, and there was this fight. So, you know, you just run off and let them get on with it. But it was funny because on payday, we used to have to line up to get paid, and you salute, you know, it's officer doing the paying. And some of the NAFI managers were waiting when the lads got paid for the money that they owed them. And my ex, he'd gone back to UK at this particular day, and I went to get my pay, and Mr. Boone said to me, Larriman said you pay his book. I thought, what? You know, I couldn't believe it. But because it was Mr. Boone, I paid it, you know, he was a nice little chap. I used to give my friend a Coca-Cola at 8 o'clock in the morning when she came. She was always last minute. We were always down in the dining hall. And all she had for breakfast was a big glass of Coca-Cola. And he wasn't home, but it's just to knock on the window and he'd let her have one, you know. Well, it has shaped me. I suppose I am very organised, and I've always been able to juggle half a dozen balls at once, you know, maybe it's now just 2 or 3. And I've always been very responsible. It makes you very, very responsible, I think, and helpful. And I would always help people in distress, definitely. And I miss all the friends I've lost, definitely, very much so. Well, I'm a bit forthright at times, probably. Sometimes I'm a bit backwards in coming forwards, but if it's a really serious issue, then I will speak up. And as I spoke up once before in the military for one of my friends, and we had an anaesthetist, or everybody was frightened of a military man in the hospital on the ward, and he reported one of my friends for something or other that she hadn't done right in his room. And of course, she was hauled over the coals by the sisters and forbidden to go into that room, as we all were after that. But I went marching round to his room, opened the door, and I said, "Well, I hope you're satisfied now. You've got Nurse Orr into trouble and she's crying." And he looked at me over his glasses as he was reading his paper and never said a word. And I came out and I thought, I'm dead. But, we kept away anyway this particular day. I was coming along the outside of the ward, because there were outside bits, where people could be out there if they really needed fresh air. And he came out of his room and I was going towards him and I thought, oh my God, Anyway, he said, "Nurse, you see that post up there? That's where the Japanese were spied, they look out for the Japanese." And he was telling me all the history of the hospital. And I was thinking, and maybe because I'd stood up to him, he had a bit of respect for me, and he perhaps felt really awful about what he'd done. I hope he did. I think we should go back to conscription, because there are so many young people who are not working, and it's a shame, And I think if a lot of them didn't perhaps do very well at school, but if they went back into the military, they'd have a lot of training, not just on military subjects, but they'd get arithmetic and maths, arithmetic, and they'd get English, and they'd learn how to apply for jobs, and it would really shape them too, and they'd learn discipline and getting up in the morning and getting on with it, definitely. Well, I've got one medal, which I was really thrilled about, and it was for the Pinjat Java Malaysia medal. I've got to go the things in there. Oh, this was awarded because when I was in Singapore, there was what they call the Borneo crisis, and there was quite a lot of fighting going on up in Malaya, and we used to get patients being flown in by helicopter at night usually, for the hospital, for the surgeons. And I had to go for this to the Royal Armouries, and there were a lot of people all being awarded at the same time by a Malaysian officer. And I thought, oh, it's lovely that, I was thrilled to get it. I'm very proud of this medal because it's the only one I've got. and it was just so unexpected. And it came late in life as well. So they must have decided, to award people these medal from the Malaysian government, which was lovely. Yeah, very pleased to get it. Well, when I left the service, obviously I did have a few savings, but I can't remember getting any support from the military whatsoever, which was a shame. And I think today, I don't think the men do. I think it's a bit better than it was, but we shouldn't be seeing veterans on the street, and that is awful, dreadful. Anybody joining up today, I would say, if think about a trade that you like to do, and see if you can get into that trade. Sometimes you need certain qualifications, and if that's not available, maybe there's something else similar that you could do. So you need to find out what trades are available. Now, be prepared that the first few months of your training might be very trying. As a nurse, we didn't have to crawl through mud, and I'd have hated that. But, it is, I think, the general run for anybody joining, especially chaps, depending what you join, really. But I think the basic training is much the same for everybody. But you've got plenty of pals. You're all in the same boat. So just get on with it and enjoy the companionship, the camaraderie and that from the other chaps. Obviously, you might get ribbed on something, but try and laugh it off if you can and just, I don't know, knuckle down and do your studies and I'm sure you'll fly.